I'll read to you, all right? I'll read to you. How about that? We'll read to you. Good morning, Woodbury and Bethlehem. This is Dr. O. I'm the superintendent of schools, but today I'm going to be a storyteller. And I'm sitting here in the Olzacki compound, which all my brothers and sisters live around me, and in my favorite sweatshirt, FFA. I wonder what that means. Maybe Future Farmers of America? Well, today I'm going to share with you a story, or maybe a couple of stories, that my great-grandmother shared with me when I was very little. In fact, I think I was in preschool and first grade. I was lucky because I had my Italian grandmother living down the street, and she would walk up some nights, especially in the fall and then in the summer, and she would read us bedtime stories. I was very lucky to have all my great-grandparents, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about caring, I learned about stories of the past, and I learned about how important it was to be part of the American experience. The American experience, boys and girls, that means we care for each other. That means when times get tough, we don't buckle down, we come together as a family. And that's what these storytelling parts are about. These are scary times, but they're not, because we've got our family. And we're going to continue as strong as we can with family in our community, and we're going to do just fine. So this story is by Hans Christian Andersen. And it's the story of Thumbelina. Some people may know that story, and your parents are probably going, I remember that from way back when. You may not know it, but let me share that with you. And by the way, I have two helpers today, which you maybe can't see, but at my feet I have my dog Django and my dog Bella, and they're both listening to the stories as well. So they like stories, and I hope you do too. This is the story of Thumbelina. There once was a woman who very much wanted a child. She went out and asked an old witch where to find one. Why, that's easy, replied the witch. Take this seed, plant it, and see what you shall see. The woman thanked the witch and planted the seed in a flower pot. It sprouted and grew into a tall flower bud. When the flower burst open, sitting on the green cushion at its center was a tiny, pretty little girl. She was no taller than your thumb, so the woman called her Thumbelina. The woman created a bed for her out of a polished walnut shell, violets and a rose petal. Thumbelina played along the flowers arranged on the plate of water. She had a tulip petal boat with a pair of white horsehairs for oars. She mowed and sang, and with a soft, sweet little voice. One night, an ugly, skinny toad, looking for a wife for her ugly, skinny son, hopped in through a broken window. She seized the bed with Thumbelina sleeping in it, taking it to her muddy marsh on the bank of the stream. Don't wake her, the old mother toad said to her son. We will put her on one of the broad water lily pads in the stream so she can't run off. Then we can decorate a mud house for you two to live in. When Thumbelina awoke next morning and saw where she was, she began to cry. The toads swam to her lily pad island, and the mother toad curtsied deep into the water. Meet my son, the old toad said. He is to be your husband, and you will share a delightful muddy home. Poor Thumbelina cried and cried, and cried still more. She didn't want to marry a toad. Little fishes swimming beneath the lily pad heard the mother toad. They popped their heads up to look at the stranded little girl and felt sad anyone so lovely should be made to live in a muddy, slimy home. The fish gnawed at the green stem of the floating lily pad and cut through. Away it went, pulled in the stream's current, and away went Thumbelina. So Thumbelina became a traveler, and she was so happy. Floating along, enjoying the sunlight on the water, she even began to sing. A white butterfly fluttered around, then landed on the lily pad. Thumbelina undid her sash and tied one end of it to the butterfly and the other end to the lily pad. So they went along much, much faster. But when a big Maybug caught sight of her, he fastened his claws around her waist and flew with her up into a tree. The lily pad and the butterfly were carried away downstream. Thumbelina was frightened. She was up in the tree with the Maybug, but she was even more sorry for the nice white butterfly and hoped he would free himself from the lily pad. The Maybug didn't care. He fed Thumbelina nectar from the flowers and told her she was quite pretty, even though she didn't look like a Maybug. After a while, all the other Maybugs came to visit. They stared at Thumbelina. "While she only has 2 legs. What a miserable sight," said the mother Maybug. "She hasn't any feelers," said another Maybug. "She is narrow in the waist. How awful. She looks like a human child. How hideous." The Maybug had flown away with Thumbelina, and the Thumbelina knew that she was pretty, but he nodded and agreed with the others, declaring that he wouldn't have anything to do with her. They left her on a daisy. There is little Thumbelina all alone on the daisy. All summer long, Thumbelina lived alone. She wore a hammock out of grass and hung it under a big burdock leaf to keep off the rain. She ate nectar and drank dew. Summer and autumn went by. But when winter came, Thumbelina was terribly cold. The birds flew away, the big burdock leaf shriveled. Every time a snowflake struck her, it was like a white shovelful of snow landing on one of us. She became so sad because she was so small. Lost in a large field where the grain had been harvested months before, cold, hungry, Thumbelina found the door of a field mouse's hole and begged for a bit of barley. "Oh, you poor dear, come in and share my dinner," said the field mouse, who was a kind-hearted creature with a cozy home and a storeroom full of grain. The field mouse liked Thumbelina so much she invited her to stay, saying, "You can do the tidying and tell me stories." Thumbelina was happy to be warm and happy to be well fed. "Soon my neighbor and the mole will visit," said the field mouse. "One day, very soon. He is very wealthy. His rooms are larger than mine, and he wears a black velvet coat that oftentimes moles do. If you married him, you would always be warm and be very comfortable." Thumbelina did not like the sound of this. The mole dug a long tunnel from his home and invited the field mouse and Thumbelina to see it. Though he wanted them, there was a dead bird lying. Thumbelina thought, why is that dead bird there? Sure enough, in the tunnel lay a swallow, his lovely wings folded. Thumbelina felt so sorry for him. She loved all the birds of the summer, but the mole gave the body a kick, and his short stumps, saying, "He won't chirp anymore. How wretched is it to be a bird who has nothing but this chirp, chirp, and must starve to death when winter comes along. That doesn't make any sense." "Yes, you are right, sensible mole," the field mouse agreed. "What good is a chirping, chirping bird in the wintertime when you need food and warmth?" When the others turned away, Thumbelina bent over to the smooth bird and helped to smooth his feathers more. That night, she wove a blanket out of hay and spread it over the dead swallow so he would lie warm in the cold earth. "Goodbye, pretty bird," she said. She laid her head on his breast and was startled to feel a soft thump. Wait, something was beating inside. It was the bird's heart. He was not dead. He was only numb with the cold. And now that he'd been given a warm blanket, he came to life again. Thumbelina was frightened because the bird was so much bigger than her, but she gathered her courage and tucked the thistledown around the poor cold creature and brought the mint leaf that he covered her own bed to put under his head. The following night, she brought him water in the petal of a flower. The swallow woke up and drank, and told her how he had hurt one of his wings on a thorn bush, so he couldn't fly as fast as the other swallows when they all left for the winter. Finally, he had to drop to the ground. His wing hurt so bad. That was all he could remember. The swallow stayed in the tunnel through the winter, and Thumbelina looked after him. She didn't tell the field mouse or the mole because she didn't like what they had to say. But they also didn't like the poor swallow. As soon as the earth grew warmer, the swallow said it was time for him to go. Thumbelina helped him make a hole in the tunnel ceiling, and the splendid sun came shining through, warming them both. He asked Thumbelina to come, but she knew the field mouse would be offended, so she said no. "Farewell, my good and pretty girl," said the swallow, flying into the sunset. Thumbelina became quite upset. The grain in the field grew so tall it was like a dense forest to her. The field mouse said Thumbelina should spend the summer days sowing. "You must have fine bedding ready when you become the mole's wife," she said. She hired 4 spiders to spin and weave. The mole visited every evening and loved remarking that the summer was nearly over and it was time, and he would soon be time to marry Thumbelina. But Thumbelina didn't want to marry the mole. Every morning and every evening she would slip out the door to catch glimpses of the blue sky where the breeze blew the beautiful grain. When autumn arrived, the grain was harvested, leaving a short, dry stubble. The field mouse declared the bedding was ready so Thumbelina could marry the mole. Thumbelina cried and said she would not. Fiddlesticks, said the field mouse. Why, the queen herself doesn't have a black velvet coat as fine as his. His kitchen and cellar were wonderfully full. Be thankful, young girl. On the wedding day, the mole arrived to take Thumbelina as to his house deep underground. Farewell, bright sun, she called sadly. If you see my dear swallow, please give him my love. Chirp, 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 chirp. The swallow was here. The swallow was here. She told him how she hated having to marry the mole and live below ground. Come with me, the swallow said. Come with me. You saved my life. I will take you to where it's always summer. Thumbelina thought, always summer. Oh my goodness. Thumbelina then jumped on the swallow's back, warm in his feathers, and off they flew. They soared over countries where oranges and lemons hung from the trees until green trees on the shore of blue lakes. They came to ancient places of dazzling white marble. At the top of the lofty pillars, many swallows had made their nests. This is my home, said Thumbelina the swallow. Choose one of the flowers to live in. Thumbelina was amazingly happy and said she would have a glorious white rose. The swallow flew down and put Thumbelina on a rose petal. She was very surprised to find a little man in the flower. He was shining and transparent like glass, and he was the same size as Thumbelina. He wore a gold crown and had a shining wings, and was king of the flower people. The tiny king thought Thumbelina was the loveliest girl he had ever laid his eyes on. He asked her name, then asked her to marry him and become queen of all the flowers. He was very, very different from the slimy toad son, the maybug, and the mole. Thumbelina said yes. The king gave Thumbelina his crown. Then, out from every flower trooped little ladies and little gentlemen, bringing presents. But the best gift of all was a pair of wings that had once belonged to a silver fly. With these fastened to her back, Thumbelina too could flit from flower to flower. Everyone rejoiced, and the swallows sang beautifully during their service. He was sad, though, deep down, for he liked Thumbelina so much, he never wanted to leave her. Goodbye, goodbye, called the swallow. He flew over the warm countries back to faraway Denmark, where he had a little nest outside of a window of a man who told fairy tales. The swallow sang chirp, 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 all to the storyteller all summer long. And that's how we know this tale. And that's the story of Thumbelina.